Jon Bon Jovi became a star singing hits like Living on a Prayer, You Give Love a Bad Name, and Wanted Dead or Alive.
For decades, Jon Bon Jovi has been the golden boy of rock. He was a man whose voice powered stadium anthems and whose love story with high school sweetheart Dorothea Hurley seemed unshakable. But behind the scenes, life has taken a devastating turn. After years of standing by his side through fame, scandal, and success, Dorothea is now facing a painful reality. With Jon's heartbreaking diagnosis looming over their once picture-perfect world, the woman who vowed to love him through it all is being forced to say goodbye in a way no fan ever expected. Making it big. Before the world screamed his name under stadium lights, before leather jackets and power ballads turned him into a rock god, Jon Bon Jovi was just John Francis Bon Jovi Jr., a kid from Sayreville, New Jersey, chasing a dream that seemed too big for the small streets he grew up on. His story didn't start with fame. It started in a modest, working-class home where music wasn't just a hobby, it was a heartbeat. He was born in Perth Amboy, the son of John Francis Bon Jovi Sr., a Marine-turned-barber, and Carol Sharkey, a former Marine herself who later worked as a florist and even once wore the Playboy bunny costume. His father carried Italian and Slovak roots from Siaka, Sicily, while his mother brought German and Russian blood into the mix. Together, they raised Jon in a Catholic household, never knowing that the restless boy under their roof would one day sell out arenas across the world. Jon liked to joke about his family tree. He admitted that he wasn't really related to Frank Sinatra, but confessed he loved the rumor anyway. And why not? For a kid dreaming bigger than his zip code, being tied to the chairman of the board, if only by myth, felt like destiny teasing him. He bounced between schools, first St. Joseph High School in Metuchen, then Sayreville War Memorial High School, always with his eyes on something beyond textbooks. Music pulled him in early, and by 1974 he was already carving his place, forming his first band, Rays, and showing up at school talent contests. At 16 he pulled together another group, Atlantic City Motorway, with his friend David Bryan, who would later sit at the keyboards as a founding member of Bon Jovi. Jon wasn't just a dreamer, he was a hustler. While other teens were chasing summer jobs, he was sneaking into Jersey clubs with his band Jon Bon Jovi and the Wild Ones, performing at places like the Fast Lane and opening for local favorites. By 1980, he had another band, The Rest, warming up crowds for acts like Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes. The stages were small, the crowds modest, but Jon's ambition towered over it all. When he wasn't performing, he was mopping floors at the Power Station recording studio, owned by his cousin Tony Bon Jovi. It was grunt work, errands, sweeping, the kind of job that kept him close to the magic, but still on the outside. Then came a twist of fate. While disco producer Mecco was recording the Star Wars Christmas album, Jon got a chance to step up to the mic. He sang R2-D2 We Wish You a Merry Christmas, and just like that, Jon Bon Jovi had his first professional credit. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. By 1983, he wasn't content with sidelines anymore. He called bassist Alec John Such, who brought in drummer Tico Torres. Guitarist Richie Sambora soon joined, and alongside David Bryan, they created the lineup that would become Bon Jovi. A year later, their debut album was out. By 1986, everything exploded. Slippery. When Wet didn't just sell, it conquered. With anthems like You Give Love a Bad Name and Livin' on a Prayer roaring up the charts and cementing their place in rock history, stadiums were now their playground, and Jon Bon Jovi was the golden-haired heartthrob leading the charge. But success came with a price. The non-stop cycle of recording and touring nearly broke them. After the grueling Slippery, When Wet in New Jersey back-to-back runs, the band was running on fumes, physically, mentally, and emotionally drained. 16 months on the road left them hollow. By the end of the Mexico tour, they didn't even bother with goodbyes. They simply went home, unsure if there would ever be another album. But Jon didn't sit still. In 1990, he dabbled in acting, appearing in Young Guns 2, and struck gold with Blaze of Glory, a song that earned him a Golden Globe. Soon after, the pull of the band came back. In 1994, they reunited for Keep the Faith, Then John dipped back into solo waters with Destination Anywhere in 1997. The machine rolled on, Crush in 2000, Bounce in 2002, Lost Highway, The Circle, and beyond. Even after Richie Sambora's exit in 2013, John kept the engine running, steering the band into burning bridges, and This House Is Not For Sale. By 2019, Bon Jovi wasn't just a band, they were an institution. 15 studio albums, over 130 million records sold, and more than 2,700 concerts across 50 countries. They weren't just playing music, they were writing the soundtrack to generations. In 2018, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a recognition that seemed overdue but inevitable. And John, he never stopped pushing himself. Acting roles trickled in. Moonlight and Valentino, The Leading Man, and Pay It Forward, where he played Helen Hunt's abusive ex, and TV stints on in the City, Ally McBeal, The West Wing, and even 30 Rock. Hollywood was a side hustle, but it proved one thing: Jon Bon Jovi was more than a rock star. He was a storyteller, a hustler, a survivor. From sweeping studio floors to sweeping arenas with anthems, his journey wasn't just about fame. It was about grit, reinvention, and the kind of restless drive that refused to fade even when the lights dimmed, even when exhaustion set in, even when life forced him to pause. Jon Bon Jovi wasn't born a legend. He built himself into one, piece by piece, chord by chord, until the boy from Jersey became the man who could bring the world to its feet. But even legends aren't immune to cracks. The cracks within the group. From the outside, Bon Jovi always looked bulletproof, the kind of band that could survive any storm. But behind the roaring guitars, the fractures were already forming long before Jon Bon Jovi's personal world began to crumble. For years, John and Richie Sambora had been more than bandmates. They were brothers in every sense of the word, childhood friends who grew up in the same New Jersey hospitals and neighborhoods before conquering the world together. Fans saw them as inseparable, the rock and roll equivalent of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But in 2013, that bond shattered in the most unexpected way. John has often recalled how it happened. The band was in Calgary, already 21 shows into their Because We Can tour, when Richie simply didn't show up. Their manager broke the news late at night, and John remembered thinking it was impossible. There hadn't been a fight, no big blow-up over money, nothing anyone could point to. Richie had just walked away. The reality was harsher. Those closest to him admitted they had seen the signs. Tico Torres said he could tell Richie was struggling, both with sobriety and the crushing pace of life on the road. John later admitted he should have slowed things down instead of pushing the band at a breakneck pace. Richie himself would go on to explain that it wasn't one single thing, but a combination. A stale creative cycle, the relentless touring, and the pull of his daughter Ava, who needed him more than the music did. Still, for John, it was like being abandoned mid-battle. He had to carry the band on his shoulders, singing and covering guitar duties until Phil X stepped in. Hugh McDonald admitted he was more sad than furious, while Tico described Richie's absence as the first time he feared there wouldn't be a happy ending for Bon Jovi. The years that followed only deepened the cracks. Richie later confessed that he felt pushed aside when someone else recorded a guitar part he thought should have been his, and John admitted he hadn't realized how deeply it had hurt him. Richie interpreted it as a message that maybe the band no longer needed him. For the first time, he started to believe they'd be better off without him. When he didn't board that plane to rejoin the tour, John and the others had no choice but to move forward. Canceling wasn't an option. Tens of thousands of fans were waiting each night. But something in Bon Jovi's DNA had changed forever. Years later in the Hulu docuseries Thank You, Good Night, John and Richie reflected on it all. John said there had never been animosity, just a sad truth. Being in a rock band wasn't a life sentence. Richie said he didn't regret leaving, though he regretted the way he did it, and he apologized to the fans. The love between him and John was still there, but it had been scarred by silence, distance, and the heavy toll of fame. And yet, looking back now, those cracks in the group feel hauntingly familiar. Just as Bon Jovi once pushed through heartbreak and loss on stage without their lead guitarist, today John's wife Dorothea is being forced to push through something far more devastating at home. The diagnosis hanging over him has turned their private world upside down. And for Dorothea, it's a test of endurance no stage lights can soften. The cracks that fame once exposed in the band are now mirrored in Jon's personal life. Except this time, the goodbye she faces may be final. But here's the thing about Jon Bon Jovi. Cracks never meant collapse. The injuries that almost crippled Jon Bon Jovi. Jon Bon Jovi has always been a man who refused to surrender. Not to the industry, not to time, not even to his own body. Back in 2010, fans at the new Meadowlands Stadium saw it with their own eyes. Toward the end of a 2.5-hour concert in his home state of New Jersey, Jon tore a calf muscle. Most performers would have limped off, let the lights go down, and called it a night. But not him. He clenched his jaw, leaned hard against his mic stand, and kept going, determined to give his people every last note they came for. As the band launched into Glad All Over, the injury hit. By the time they reached the encore, Livin' on a Prayer, Jon was hobbling across the stage, gritting through the pain with a smile that was half defiance, half reassurance. He told the crowd his calf muscle had just blown out, but laughed it off, saying he still had another leg. Then, flexing his foot for the fans to see, he joked that he was old now, but still good-looking. That night, keyboardist David Bryan had to help him off stage, wrapping an arm around him like a brother, guiding another through the fire. It wasn't the first time Jon pushed through injury, and it wouldn't be the last. The Circle Tour, released later in a concert film, went on to become the biggest tour of 2010, grossing over $200 million. Even when storms and slippery stages left him with a torn knee ligament in 2011, Jon showed up. He strapped on a brace, got surgery, and still played for packed arenas without canceling a single date. To the outside world, he seemed indestructible, a man whose willpower was as loud as his music. But time has a way of catching up to even the strongest fighters. Those moments on stage where he refused to back down from pain now feel eerily prophetic. Because today, Jon Bon Jovi is facing a battle that no encore can fix, and no stage lights can mask. His wife Dorothea, the same woman who watched him limp across stadiums and patch himself back together for decades, is now being forced to watch him break in ways no one ever expected. This time, it isn't a calf muscle or a torn knee that threatens him. It's something deeper, something far more devastating. The kind of diagnosis that doesn't just test a performer's endurance, but a family's strength. For Dorothea, the woman who stood by him through every tour, every scandal, every triumph, the fight has shifted from keeping up with the chaos of rock and roll to preparing for a heartbreaking goodbye. And unlike those nights when he limped but laughed, this battle carries no punchline, no crowd to cheer him through the pain. Jon Bon Jovi's enduring relationship with his wife. Before the arenas, before the platinum records, before the roar of 100,000 fans chanting his name, there was just Jon and Dorothea. Two kids in a New Jersey classroom, one of them already dreaming bigger than the school walls could contain, and the other grounded enough to know the difference between fantasy and grit. She was the quiet one who let him copy off her history test. He was the boy with wild hair and wilder ambitions. Somewhere between the stolen glances and teenage banter, something permanent took root. Jon has said that the attraction was instant. The minute he saw Dorothea Hurley, he was hooked. And decades later, he still swears nothing has changed. That in itself is telling. Because if rock and roll is built on temporary highs and fast goodbyes, Jon and Dorothea have been the glorious exception. A love story that outlasted fame, temptation, scandal, and even despair. By the time they decided to marry, Jon was no longer just the boy next door. He was Jon Bon Jovi, frontman of one of the biggest bands on the planet, living a whirlwind life of chart-topping singles, world tours, and endless headlines. Most couples would have crumbled under that kind of spotlight. But in April 1989, with a #1 album and single, Jon turned to Dorothea in the middle of their West Coast run and suggested the unthinkable. Why don't we go right now? He was talking about Vegas, about marriage, about walking away from the circus for a day to claim something of their own. Dorothea thought he was out of his mind, but she went anyway. They slipped away quietly, told no one, and said "I do" in a chapel with their cab driver as witness. It should have been a fairy tale moment, but Jon later admitted that nearly everyone around them, from management to family, tried to sour it. It was too impulsive, too risky, too rock star. But Jon and Dorothea didn't care. 35 years later, they're still married. living proof that sometimes the wildest choices are the ones that last. Marriage wasn't the end of their story, it was the foundation. Over the next decade, they raised 4 children together. Stephanie Rose in 1993, Jesse James in 1995, Jacob Jake in 2002, and their youngest, Romeo, in 2004. Despite Jon's fame, they tried to raise their children in relative privacy. The spotlight was his burden to carry, not theirs. Still, family moments would slip into the public eye, like the time Stephanie, then just 7 years old, joined her dad on stage to sing "I've Got the Girl." Years later, she returned to the mic beside him in Las Vegas, a full-circle reminder that no matter how big the arenas got, his proudest stage partner was always his daughter. Jesse grew into a football player at Notre Dame before joining forces with his dad to launch Hampton Water, their family wine label that blended tradition with a dash of rebellion. Jake chased acting, carving his own path, and even captured headlines of his own when he got engaged to Stranger Things star Millie Bobby Brown. Romeo, the youngest, kept life lively at home. For Jon, fatherhood changed everything. He once admitted, "You only truly understand love after you hold your child for the first time." But even with the joy, there were shadows. In 2012, Stephanie called her parents from the hospital after overdosing on heroin. Jon described it as his worst moment as a father. He remembered the way she tried to reassure him, saying, "I'm all right," before explaining what had happened. It rattled him to his core. Fame, wealth, none of it mattered when his child was on the line. Together, he and Dorothea walked through the storm, supporting their daughter's recovery. For a couple who had already weathered the strains of fame, it was another test of their endurance, and one more they survived. What makes their marriage extraordinary isn't just its longevity, it's the way they've built something bigger than themselves. In 2006, they launched the JBJ Soul Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to breaking cycles of poverty and homelessness. It started small with renovated homes in Philadelphia, but grew into a nationwide movement. Their soul kitchens became a symbol of compassion, volunteer-run restaurants where diners paid if they could, or had their meals covered if they couldn't. Dorothea was the heartbeat of the idea. Watching families struggle to afford basic meals hit her hard, and she refused to stand by. Jon often credits her for her vision, admitting that his wife is the real backbone of their philanthropic work. Together, they've built more than 500 affordable housing units and turned charity into a legacy. It's a balance they've mastered. Jon on the stage, Dorothea steering the family and their mission with quiet strength. He has never pretended he was perfect. In interviews, he has confessed to missing birthdays, school plays, and milestones. But Dorothea, he says, understood the life they chose. She didn't just marry a man, she married the chaos of a dreamer. And somehow, she's held it all together. Over the years, Dorothea has shared glimpses of why their marriage works. On The Howard Stern Show, she admitted that while Jon was 100% the cutest guy in high school, she wasn't dazzled by the idea of dating a musician until she actually heard him sing. It wasn't the band, the leather, or the lifestyle that caught her. It was his voice, his talent, the core of who he was. Her family, like many others, wasn't convinced. Who bets on a rock star when the odds of stability are practically zero? But Dorothea never wavered. She used to joke that when people told her, "Good luck with that," her response was simple: "My boyfriend's gonna be a rock star." She believed when few others did, and she stayed when many others would have walked away. Jon often says their marriage works because they've always been in it together. Through the madness of stadium tours, the heartbreak of family crises, the exhaustion of fame, Dorothea was constant. She was his anchor when the world wanted to sweep him away. Today, after more than 3 decades of marriage, their bond feels less like a fairy tale and more like something tougher, grittier, and ultimately more inspiring. They've lived through the highs most people can only dream of. No one hits, sold-out arenas, a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. But they've also endured the kind of lows that fame doesn't shield you from. Addiction scares, family crises, and the endless pressure of living under the public's gaze. And now, with Jon's health struggles casting a shadow over their world, Dorothea once again stands by him, just as she always has. The girl who once rolled her eyes at the band boy in high school is now the woman fighting through the hardest chapter of his life. Their story isn't about perfection. It's about persistence, loyalty, and love that refuses to break. Because in the end, Jon Bon Jovi may be the rock star, but Dorothea is the reason he still has something worth singing about. Yet, for all their resilience, nothing tested them like the moment Jon's greatest gift, his voice, began to fade. Jon Bon Jovi's wife is saying goodbye after his heartbreaking diagnosis. For more than 4 decades, Jon Bon Jovi has been the soundtrack to countless lives. His voice carried anthems like "It's My Life" and "Livin' on a Prayer" through stadiums packed with strangers who sang them like gospel. But in recent years, that very voice, the gift that built his empire, almost slipped away. In 2022, Bon Jovi was hospitalized and underwent vocal cord surgery after years of struggling in silence. For a man who'd built his identity on singing his lungs out, the diagnosis was crushing. One of his vocal cords was atrophying. "One was as thick as my thumb," he explained. The other was as thin as a pinky. The imbalance meant the strong cord was pushing the weaker one aside, stealing power from his voice. "My craft was being taken from me," he admitted in People's 2024 cover story. And yet, through every heartbreak, every stage of recovery, there was one constant: Dorothea Hurley, the high school sweetheart who became his wife and his fiercest truth-teller. By 2022, Jon had already been feeling off for years. He tried everything: lasers, acupuncture, vitamins, collagen, you name it, hoping to avoid the word surgery. But the cracks showed when he was on the road. One night in Nashville, after giving everything he had to the crowd, Jon came off stage believing he'd done well. Dorothea didn't let him off easy. "It wasn't great," she told him, "and I've seen you be great." Those words cut deeper than any critic's review. They were devastating because they were true. For a fleeting second, Jon heard the one phrase he never wanted echoing in his mind: "It's time to retire." But Dorothea wasn't telling him to quit. She was telling him to fight, and that's exactly what he did. Doctors told him the truth. This was part of aging. The vocal folds thin out and they don't close properly anymore. The only solution, if he wanted to keep singing, was surgery. So, with encouragement from his friend Shania Twain, who had undergone the same procedure in 2018, Jon finally agreed. He called it a facelift for the vocal cords. Surgeons placed a cutting-edge implant to strengthen the weak fold and bring his voice back into balance. Still, it wasn't instant magic. 2 weeks after, he admitted he sounded worse than he felt. He wasn't even allowed to sing for 3 months. But Jon Bon Jovi has never been the type to stay down. He worked with vocal coaches, committed to daily exercises, and documented his progress in the Hulu docuseries Thank You Goodnight, The Bon Jovi Story. Now, nearly 3 years post-surgery, he says every day is part of the recovery process. "I'm capable of singing," he told People. "What I'm not necessarily capable of is 2.5 hours a night, 4 nights a week, but I'm aspiring to get that back." His bandmate and drummer Tico Torres put it more bluntly: "He's hitting notes he hasn't hit since he was a kid. We're proud of him." What the ordeal gave Jon wasn't just his voice back, it gave him perspective. "The thing that gave me so much pleasure had been taken away," he reflected. Joy is something you've got to work at. Happiness is what you make it. It's not about seizing the day anymore, it's about embracing it. "I don't have to punch life in the face anymore, I just give it a hug." That shift is all over Bon Jovi's upcoming album Forever, out June 7, 2024, recorded after his surgery. The songs are tinged with grit, gratitude, and that huskier but still unmistakable voice. "What really matters in a life?" he asked. "It's love and loyalty. It's finding things that make you want to get out of bed in the morning." For Jon, that answer has always started with Dorothea. Jon often says he's no saint. He missed birthdays, school plays, anniversaries, the collateral damage of being a rock icon. But Dorothea stayed. She's been there through the heights of fame, the chaos of raising 4 kids out of the spotlight, and the terrifying moments like in 2012 when their daughter Stephanie nearly died of a heroin overdose. Jon once admitted it was the worst moment of his life as a father. But again, he and Dorothea faced it together. She's also the architect behind their shared philanthropy. In 2006, the couple founded the JBJ Soul Foundation, creating affordable housing and launching Soul Kitchen restaurants where meals run on a pay-if-you-can model. It was Dorothea's idea, proof of the quiet power she's always carried. Even now, when Jon's voice falters, it's Dorothea who holds the mirror steady. "There's no one better than her to tell me the truth," he says. and that truth has saved him more than once. As if vocal cord surgery wasn't enough, Jon faced another scare in 2021 when he tested positive for contagious virus right before a performance in Florida. Fans were already seated for what was supposed to be an intimate acoustic show when organizers announced he had pulled out. Luckily, he was fully vaccinated and his symptoms were mild. "I'm feeling fine," he assured fans at the time, isolating until he recovered. But the close call reminded him again of fragility, of how quickly things can be stripped away. In Thank You Goodnight, there's a haunting thread, Jon's awareness that the end of his touring days could be near. He's not ready to retire, but he's realistic. "If I can't do it at 102%, then I say thank you and good night," he told producers. That's not bitterness, it's acceptance. For a man who once lived to conquer the stage, there's a strange kind of peace in knowing when to let go. Still, he's hopeful. He wants to tour again. He's working tirelessly so that one day soon he can sing for 2.5 hours a night, 4 nights a week, without compromise. Fans are praying for the same. At the core of it all, the highs of global fame, the lows of personal battles, the health scares, the triumphs is the love story that started in a high school classroom. Jon Bon Jovi and Dorothea Hurley have been married for 35 years, but it isn't the kind of marriage that coasts. It's the kind that wrestles with hard truths, survives the storms, and holds on tighter when life tries to tear it apart. "Everybody said it wouldn't last," Jon once recalled. "But she's the glue. She's been in it for the whole game." And maybe that's the secret. Not stadium lights, not hit records, not the legacy of a rock star. Just one man and one woman who chose each other every day for 35 years and who keep choosing each other still. Because when the voice fades, when the crowd's quiet, when it's time to say goodnight, love is what remains. Which Bon Jovi song is your favorite? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.